Data Storytellers. Today, I'm here with Helen Mannion, who's the Global Data Officer over at Specsavers. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, it's really great to be here. Thank you.
Just to start with, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your journey to becoming the Global Data Officer at Specsavers.
So my background is analytics and data through and through. But in all honesty, I suppose I fell into it a little bit when I first, in my first job. I was quite lucky, I suppose, that my first job was actually working in a data and analytics team, building out predictive models. I hadn't really planned to go into data, and then it was a relatively new area, really. But I had some really good leaders who spent a lot of time helping and training us, and from there just went on to do a variety of different data and analytics roles across telco, financial services, and now more retail and health sort of industries, and in lots of different areas of the business. Data is one of those departments that can sit in lots of different locations across the business. So I've been lucky enough to spend time in sort of marketing and finance and strategy and other areas of the business as well.
Yeah, and I reached out for a reason. I saw you had a pretty diverse background working in not just analytics, but also BI and data protection. So kind of taking on the whole beast of data. What do you like most about working in this industry?
I mean, I think data is fascinating. I think technology and gadgets are fascinating too. I'm a bit of a techno geek, but I think it is really incredible, actually, the benefits that you can get from data. And I love the sort of different news stories. I love the fact that technology combined with data can make our lives so much easier. And I love the positive benefits that you can get from using data. Health outcomes are particularly, I think, just incredible, or helping sort of more wider world issues, whether it's just everywhere, isn't it? And I think that's what's fascinating, whether it's environmental or sustainability or health outcomes, or just making our lives easier with Alexa. It's that you don't run out of variety.
Yeah, it's super true. And I think that actually this has culminated in your role as the global data officer for Specsavers. What are you up to in this current role? Do you have like an overarching responsibility, and what kind of level of the journey, I would say, you guys at?
So I joined Specsavers specifically, I suppose, to run their data transformation journey. And they're a very data immature organization. So when I joined 3.5 years ago, I think that not everybody was necessarily convinced that data could really drive value. It wasn't really widely adopted. Everybody was using Excel and Access. They didn't have any reporting tool. Data was siloed and all over the place. Predictive modeling was done by agencies and one-off. And we're on a really massive journey, and we've made massive progress over the last 3.5 years, but we're still relatively immature and still really at the beginning phases of our journey. I plotted out a maturity curve recently for the organization on a scale of 0 to 10, and I put us still at a 2. And I think that the team have made immense progress over the last 3.5 years, but I still think that there's a huge amount of opportunity.
Well, it's super interesting, because I'm sure if you did that scale 4 years ago, you probably would have been way higher. But when with data, the parameters move, right? The parameters move to being able to remain competitive and to gain market share and to do all the wonderful things that data can do for businesses. And it'd be really interesting to take a deep dive into some of the reasons you found, not just at Specsavers but elsewhere, as to maybe some of the common factors as to what you've seen as stopping data transformation moving forward. I mean, what are some of the key common pitfalls you've seen in data transformation journeys?
I think embedding is really important. I'm a big believer in the people who've got the business knowledge and understanding can really be the people that actually create the value. And to really make that happen, I think you need to be really successful at embedding data and analytics capability and skills alongside very deep business knowledge. And I think it's the two going together. But actually, that is quite hard to embed quickly, especially on a large scale. And I think as well, like another pitfall would definitely be legacy systems, especially in big organizations that have been around for many years. I mean, they've all got legacy systems. Some that means that data is really hard to get out of, to pull out the data out of those systems. Some they're just, not capturing what you need. I think it's a variety of different issues. Data quality and data management also is often quite an issue in lots of these environments or in organizations. I think so many of these the things that you ultimately need to, there are, I suppose, lots of different pillars that you need to all change to be successful, I think, on a data transformation journey. And a huge number of them don't involve one central team. They involve multiple people because, and I think it's going back to like one of the first points that I made, that data is everywhere and that's why I enjoy it. But in organizations, that's true too. And because of that breadth, it makes the adoption of lots of these things really challenging, I think. I mean, but also on the flip side, great opportunity and quite exciting journey. But
yeah, absolutely. And I think that the all these pillars, to be able to get to the next level, you need the right people with the right skill set and the right mentality as well, right? And I mean, from your experience, what are some of the best ways for data analytics leaders to gain more influence within the business?
I think you definitely need a big focus on value and the outcomes that you're driving, and that has to be aligned to the ultimate business strategy and objectives. I think that if you're very focused on that and really understanding and it comes back, I suppose, to that deep understanding of your business in some regards, but you have to have a deep understanding of the business, then you have to understand what levers you need to pull to create the value. I think, and then you need the skills of actually how do you actually embed that. And I think that always involves multiple people, even just that one end-to-end journey. It involves different skill sets and different people in different teams. So you have to be very able to win hearts and minds and influence. But I think a real focus on outcomes is really important.
And specifically with your role as well, how would you characterize your role in terms of the role that you play in that transformation?
I mean, I think that setting the vision is absolutely core, I think, to a sort of central senior data leader's role. But I absolutely think outcomes is a massive part of that as well. A huge hearts and minds play of gaining supporters. I think is really important. I think I personally think that a community sort of driven model is really important to actually get your messages out, and this idea of co-creation. But you absolutely need to be able to sell the vision and sell I'm a big believer as well in articulating your value through stories. I think that if you can articulate really compelling stories about the work that you're doing and the value you're driving, you almost win some hearts and minds every time you tell that story. But I also think you almost need to get other people in your organization as a community to do the similar thing. And I definitely envisage things I envisage a ripple effect almost.
This is super interesting. I didn't want to lead the witness too much, but other data storytelling is our bread and butter. And you mentioned using this to win hearts and minds and actually building a community that's spreading that message almost like an infection, but that has like negative connotations, right? So, what are some of the ways that or less so some of the stories you're telling? What are some of the ways you're telling these stories within Specsavers?
So I think this is one of the things that we definitely could get better at, I would say. But the thing that's important, I suppose, from my perspective, is in data story as well, is that actually, well, firstly, that it's not always just the central data team that's telling it. The thing that I think is brilliant is when you've got people in your community telling data stories, and almost advocating the benefits that they see, at the end point, the benefits that are having on the customers, but then almost calling back in and saying, well, that outcome ultimately is underpinned by data. Because at the end of the day, nobody's really interested in data. And I think that this is a bit of a mistake that we make, and I think I make too, because we're so embedded in our data world, but the reality is that the outcomes are what matters. And I think the more you can get people who are, so close to the customer or so close to the end outcome in their areas to start to articulate what the stories are, the better.
Super interesting stuff. So with that in mind, then, when you mentioned that the not just the data community, but the wider community of the business needs to be advocating these stories, what do you think are the qualities of the leaders who are good at doing that?
I would say that people who have good influence in the organization, they obviously can tell compelling stories generally anyway, but also, if you kind of want people who automatically have that gravitas that people will believe and follow. I also think what makes generally a good story is a little bit of fact and data to bring the story to life in itself, with a bit of emotion and hearts and minds as well in the package, and the wider context, I think, is important. So I think somebody that can bring that to life. I think a good story also has to be really simple. It's kind of like it doesn't. I think they need to be short and sweet, and people just get it. So the more you can make it short and sweet and intuitive, the better. Sometimes, a picture helps, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I just think it just needs to be it just needs to be really easy for people to understand. And the easier it is for people to understand, the better. And I think it's a really important skill generally, actually. And I think people sometimes don't necessarily see it as, it's not necessarily always seen as a skill, because I think you can quite easily get stuck in the needing to fill in all the details or explain everything end to end. But I think almost some of the greatest leaders make things super simple and relevant.
That's so true. And what you're alluding to there is the soft skills piece of data analytics. Like you mentioned influence already, but also communication, persuasion, selling, and pitching, which are kind of these words that have this negative connotation, but you can't really spearhead real meaningful change unless you're good at it, right? I mean, what role did these skills play in your success throughout your career, whether it was like getting executive sponsorship or spreading data literacy or changing the behavior of key stakeholders? Can you give some examples?
Yeah, I mean, give you some. Sorry, so ask the question again.
So, just in terms of the soft skills, where did these play a key role throughout your career?
I mean, I think leadership skills affect a huge amount of leadership skills are ultimately soft skills, and I think they're actually really critical for in any leadership position, but particularly when you're trying to actually sort of convince and get people's hearts and minds. I think there are loads of soft skills that I think are really important in this role. I think one of the key things is seeking to understand and being able to have a broad perspective. I also think that a focus on outcomes is really important too. Not to get so bogged down in in, you know, the way you want to get there, that how you get to the outcome, but more in terms of this is the outcome I need to get to, and being more flexible and having agility about taking on people's points of view along that way in terms of how to get there, I think is really important. I also think patience is really important, because you know, and there's times when I've been frustrated about, you know, I want to go faster, but I do think that sometimes recognizing that people aren't ready is really important. And I'm a big believer in going where doors are open. I think that you can spend an awful lot of time pushing water uphill. Whereas if you've got an open and willing door and somebody who's really going to, you know, really with you and wants to back you and wants to work with you and wants to change, then you can just move much, much faster. So I think being, you know, I suppose that's a little bit about the how you get there as well. You know, being willing to adapt and change based on the surroundings that you've got, I think is really important. I think the other thing that's I think is really important is making sure that you've got a really diverse group of skills around you. I'm a big believer, like I say, in SMEs plus data actually driving value, and I think that the more you can pull in that knowledge as well from the wider business into your central team and create a centre with real diverse business knowledge as well as diverse mindset and thinking, the better.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned patience there, which I think is kind of a virtue of humility in a sense, is being able to know when to assert yourself, and you know, we've got a really good idea here, it's going to transform the business, or when not to do that, and when to kind of take a step back and, you know, let people ruminate in an idea and let it settle and let it bubble up and boil. But I like the expression used of pushing water uphill, because even this in storytelling sense, it's like it paints a picture in my head of the challenge, as opposed to you just telling me I'm struggling to do this. It's actually like an idea, like that I can picture in my head. And this is again just one of those things that's really important when it comes to storytelling. And I think another element of data transformation and storytelling, and we've alluded to it a little bit here, is trust. So what do you think about the importance of trust? And when I talk about trust, I mean maybe like non-data people embracing data and trusting in that, and then vice versa too. What do you think about that?
And I think trust is hugely important. I think that ultimately, if you don't have trust, it is really hard to move. You are then in that situation ultimately where you're trying to push water uphill, I think, if you don't have some element of trust. But I think that if you are in that situation, the way that I suppose I'd go about tackling it is to deliver small bits of value that are very focused on what that person or what team really want to deliver. And I think that's true generally anyway, to be honest, because I think that you know, from a strategic data transformation perspective, you might realize that you need to deliver one thing, but I think the more you can try and combine and almost kill two birds with one stone, and deliver something that's strategically important and focused and back someone else's vision, whilst also tacking on a little bit of strategic mission and doing both at the same time, the better. And so, you know, where possible, I would try and find situations where I can do that.
Absolutely. And I think that it's all about asking the right questions. What do you think are some of the best questions to ask when building trust? And kind of on the back of that, what is your approach and process for reaching out to key stakeholders and establishing that fruitful relationship?
I mean, it's definitely, the questions are definitely around, you know, pain points, ambitions, you know, what they want to achieve, what's their strategic goals. You know, definitely, you know, trying to understand them and where they want to go, I think is really important. And I think that I think then showcasing is also a huge part of that is that storytelling again, really. But we do an awful lot of showcasing, you know, how we're helping other teams, what we're doing, what capability we have that people can utilize. And every time we have those conversations, like we do being in a relatively immature organization, we do a lot of, you know, what's the data lake, what's predictive modeling, you know, what are the things you can get your hands on today, where's the training programs that you can get your hands on. And we get huge involvement about joining these sorts of sessions, and often, you know, off the back of it, it will lead to, you know, more people coming to us and asking to get more involved. And I think, you know, often what we find is that actually, you know, I sort of feel like with trust actually and influence. Certainly, and don't get me wrong, because sometimes this absolutely has happened to me, but you know, like when you push something too hard, what happens is actually people just back off rather than actually what you want, which is to join you. Whereas when you just go, this is a bit of what we're doing, with no real kind of push elements, people go, that sounds really interesting. How do I get involved? And I find that quite often, actually, we're doing less sort of actual pushing and more just kind of showcasing, and people are then wanting to come and join us, just because they're interested and they're excited about the opportunities that will allow them to get after, and they can see the benefits that actually how that can apply to their worlds. And I think that's ultimately what we want.
Absolutely. Again, what I think you're touching to there is actually making data intriguing as opposed to just a dump of what it can do for the business. Because at the end of the day, people, the people of the business and the business itself are two very separate entities. And so what you need to do is actually paint a picture of why this is intriguing to you. This can make your job easier. This can make you and your team work less hard for the same amount of results, right? Or whatever. And that's when people piquing their interest. Where if you just throw a bunch of data at them, we can improve your productivity by 20%. Who cares, really? Honestly, is even though that's the same point you're making, you're just framing it in a very different sense. So, yeah, you're pretty much on the mark there, I think. And specifically, then with your role, are you like the data sales guy? How would you contextualize your role across the business?
I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of evangelism that has to happen. And I think, you know, I suppose, you know, such a huge part is winning hearts and minds, which does in reality, it is all about that, isn't it? In reality, I think probably another key part of my role, which I would probably argue is the most important part of my role, actually, is making sure that my team are happy. And I'm a big believer in, if your team are happy, then they deliver more.
Sure.
And I certainly know that when I'm happy, I deliver more. And I do spend a lot of time, as well as obviously on the wider business, spend a lot of time with my team. I kind of think that that they, if you've got a great team with great skills and a diverse set of skills, you know, that's it. And I think that's true, isn't it? Whether you're speaking to the business, whether it's actually your dedicated team or other teams in the business, you know, the more successful you are able to mobilize and almost encourage those individuals to sort of join your journey, the faster you will go.
Super key. So specifically then with telling that data story to the wider organization, how do you approach that?
So I suppose we do it in a variety of different ways, in all honesty, but it all centers around different types of stories. I suppose really we do show and tells. So these are the sorts of things that you can do with data. This is what we've done in Specsavers. This is the value that it's bringing. We do sort of more educational, you know, more, this is the data lake, this is predictive modeling, and how can you get involved with these things. We do more training programs. And we've done a variety of sort of leadership training programs as well as sort of technical training programs. So as well as obviously then your more dedicated stakeholder meetings as well, which are very specifically around certain areas of the business, and a variety of maybe workshops to sort of explore what their objectives are and what are the potentials, opportunities in different areas. So it's a wide variety of different things, and I would say that to be honest, that list is growing. We know, I mean, we've when I joined Specsavers, we were a very small team. We're actually grown a lot in the last 3.5 years, but definitely over the next year we have much bigger plans actually for sort of our community aspect, in terms of how that's going to evolve in our training programs. That we have now got some really clear technical training pathways. And we also do things like we're just starting to do more hackathons for data scientists, or really like showcase sessions for Power BI. But a lot of these sessions are not about us telling the wider organization about what we're doing. A lot of those sessions are also about what the people in the community are doing and sharing their stories with everyone else. And I don't think as a team you should be too precious about who does the work. It's the story that's important and the outcome that's important. And the more you can, goes back to before, the more you can get the business, the people at the end, I suppose, to tell their stories, whether that's technical stories from analysts or business. I mean, there are different audiences that you're maybe wanting them to go to, but the more you can get that principle, the more, and the more you can celebrate all of those and encourage all of those wider things happening, the more I think you're going to be able to embed the situation where you've got technical analytics combined with business knowledge, which ultimately is where we want to get to.
Yeah, and it's also about balancing the proactive with the reactive. As you said earlier, if you're too proactive about it, you're going to push people away. But you also want to be in that position where if someone does come to you with a business problem, they've acted on their intrigue. You and the team want to be able to deal with that in a really quick and something that will get quick wins for that person, that will kind of set the scene for bigger data transformation, right? And this is all super interesting stuff. So what do you think is the biggest opportunities for ambitious leaders in companies today with data analytics?
I think that I personally think that I suppose from my perspective, I think that we focus a lot, and lots of data leaders focus a lot on embedding analytics across the organization. But I think that drives an immense amount of value when you add up all of those small use cases. The scale of it drives a huge amount of value. But I also think that in addition to that, companies can gain competitive advantage from really embedding analytics and ML into technology, and into operational processes. And I think that it's the two hand in hand for me that really drive value. And I think if you can identify those value cases within your customer journeys that are going to give you a competitive advantage, I think that can be very powerful. I think it's super exciting. I think when you look at the evolution of technology and data, I think there is some incredibly powerful things. But I think what is difficult and really important is to identify the things that are really going to make a difference. I think that like historically, I think data programs occasionally just tried to do everything, and I'm a big believer in doing things almost outcome by outcome. I think that actually you get greater level of success at embedding things into your organization if you focus on a specific outcome or value case that you want to drive, deliver it end to end. And by that I mean, whilst you're delivering that outcome, can you embed and upskill people in the organization? Can you improve your data quality? Can you simultaneously sort of cover off? It's like the killing the two birds with one stone. Like an element of outcome with an element of strategy. If you can kill that and you can iterate through, you will transform as you go. I'm a big believer in doing things iteratively, and I think that the advantage of that is not only that you embed it, but you're also very clear on the outcome. And I think specifically with where you're trying to embed, ML into tech, you need to be really, really focused, I think, on what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. Well, Helen, it's been a really fantastic show, really good episode, a lot of great insights there. What advice would you give for aspiring data leaders in this space?
I think for me, one of the most important aspects of being a data leader is the leadership skills. It's the softer skills. I think focusing on storytelling, but also focusing on the outcomes, and I think that skill of agility is really important. Being able to transition as a leader to be the person that you need to be to support the people around you is really important skill. So I think that if I was to give some advice on how to transition from being sort of a technical resource into a leader, I would say, and lots of these skills are very generic, I think, for lots of leadership roles across organizations. But I think that, I think the leadership skills are really, really key. And I think the other thing that I would say is being very value focused. You have to have a bit of commercial mindset and thinking, and be focused on where you're seeing the value.
Well, Helen, there's some great advice there. Again, really good insights, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Really fun. Thank you very much.